UFC 289 is not good. I'm gonna just be brutally honest about that. UFC 289 is not a very good card, but I do think there's some better fights than people are giving it credit for, man. Now, as a card as a whole, is this one of those cards that I would pay for? No, this is not a card I would pay for, man. But in today's video, I'm going to just be talking about some of the fights on this card that I'm interested in, bro, and just give you guys some fights to look out for, my possible fights of the night and stuff like that, man. So now let's talk about 289, man. So of course, the main event, you have Arena Aldana taking on the champ Amanda Nunes, and then the co-main event, we have Charles Oliveira versus Beneil Dariush, which is going to be just amazing, man. Just amazing. And people think for whatever reason this fight is going to be like them grappling each other. I'm gonna make a whole video about this fight and why people are kind of getting that wrong. Like, I don't think either one of them are going to try to grapple for this. But outside of those two fights, a lot of people are like, man, this card is horrible. Which it is. Like, there's some terrible fights on this card that should not be on here, man. But there are some there are some interesting fighters on this card, and there are some entertaining fights. One was Khalil Roundtree versus Chris Dawkins. That fight got pulled. Chris Dawkins pulled out of that fight, but apparently they're still going to keep Khalil Roundtree on the card, which I think is cool because Khalil Roundtree is just like violence personified. Like, he just is a violent human being when it comes to the UFC, man. But there are about 4 fights I want to talk about. I'm not going to break them down completely. Again, I'm going to make a whole video about Oliveira versus Beneil Dariush, but outside of that, I'm just going to talk about these fights while like these fights that I'm about to tell you guys about. In those 4 fights, Nasruddin Imavov versus Chris Curtis, man. Dan Ige versus Ludwig. Again, Oliveira versus Beneil Dariush. And then Arena Aldana versus Amanda Nunes, man. So let's first talk about Dan Ige versus Nate Landwehr. Now, I know I just called him Ludwig too. I don't know where I got Ludwig for. First thing first, Dan Ige nickname is 50K for a reason. Like, if there's somebody who you can bet on to have fight of the night, it's 2 people for me. Michael Chandler, Dan Ige, man. Dan Ige is on a little bit of a slide though. Lost 2 out of his last 6. He's lost a high level composition like Josh Emmett. The Josh Emmett decision was close, and I always say I gave that to Ige. He lost to Calvin Kattar also, man. He's lost to Chan Sung Jung, so the Korean Zombie. So he's had a little bit of rough stretch the last couple years, but again, he still is an entertaining fighter, and he still puts on entertaining fights. And honestly, if he loses this fight, he might get cut because again, he is on a little bit of a stretch. But again, he's one of those fight of the night people, and this is why I think this is going to be fight of the night, because he has a willing trading partner next to him and Nate Landwehr. Now, if you don't know who Nate Landwehr is, he's actually become very, very entertaining and kind of just burst onto the scene when it comes to not MMA, but because he's been fighting MMA for a while, but the UFC, bro. First thing first, he puts on entertaining fights, and he's one of those dudes where it's either I'm going to knock you out or I'm going to get knocked out, like the Drew Dober treatment, even though he has like won multiple fights over the last couple years by submission. But you get what I'm saying when I say his fighting style is balls to the wall. Like, it's going to be entertaining. And when you have a dude like Ige and you have a dude like Nate, that's going to be a fight of the night guaranteed right there, man. Like, these dudes are going to swing at each other and they're going to try to beat the shit out of each other, and I love dudes like that. Plus, Nate's just entertaining, man. I think a lot of people, especially fighters, when they try to go for what character they're going to use, a lot of people go for that Conor McGregor. Nate's just like, nah, I'm just me. Like, he's just him, bro. So yeah, I'm very, very looking forward to this fight. Again, should be a good one. Going to be a great strap right there. The second one on for me, and I don't know how this fight is on the prelims. Like, you have dudes who, I don't know how this fight is on the prelims. Chris Curtis versus Imavov, man. Now, Chris Curtis is personally one of my favorite fighters in the UFC. He's essentially Black Sean Strickland in terms of defense, but the difference is he has significantly more power than Sean Strickland does, so he actually sits people down. Now, he's coming off that loss to Kevin Gastelum, which, close decision, and I always said it, if the headbutt doesn't happen, Chris Curtis probably wins that fight. And a lot of people online got mad at him for saying that, but he's completely right. If the headbutt does not happen, Chris Curtis most likely wins that fight, man. But, you know, that's in the past. Again, great boxing, great striking, doesn't kick at all, like, does not kick at all, doesn't wrestle pretty much at all unless it's defensively. So you know you're going to get a stand-up fight with Chris Curtis. And then opposite beside him is Nasruddin Imavov, who last time we saw him was getting boxed up by Chris Curtis's teammates. So Sean Strickland was putting hands on Imavov, man. So yeah, but again, Imavov fits kind of the same like precedent where his last 2 wins were by TKO and by elbow, which elbow wins are just always awesome, man, at least in my opinion. So this is going to be a good old strap, man. And again, I think this is personally going to be a little bit more entertaining than the Sean Strickland fight, just because Strickland does not have power, right? Like, Strickland does not have KO power, whereas Chris Curtis has legitimate KO power, and particularly with the way that he rips to the body and the way that he boxes, he's always going to be one of those dudes to where he's going to just wear dudes down as the fight goes down. And a guy like Imavov, where a lot of times his gas tank is a part of the reason that he wins fights. I'm just interested to see how this plays out. It is only 3 rounds. Of course, they're the last fight on the prelims, which again, I don't understand how they did that. Like, how do you get this as the last fight on the prelims, man? But interested in this one. Now, let's get to the 2 big boys. That's going to be Charles Oliveira versus Beneil Dariush. Again, I'm going to give this fight its own breakdown, man. But for whatever reason, people think this is going to be, which I know why, because, you know, Charles Oliveira's jiu-jitsu, and then you got Beneil Dariush, who's actually an amazing grappler, bro. So people think this is going to be a grappling fight, but I don't think there's going to be much. I'm not going to say much grappling involved, but I don't think there's going to be one of those fights where they're just trying to out-grapple each other. Both of them are willing people. Like, we've seen Charles Oliveira. He's a willing striker. Beneil Dariush is a willing striker. Even in Beneil Dariush's last fight against Mateusz Gamrot, he didn't offensively grapple a lot in that fight. He only grappled when Gamrot went to take him down, man. So, yeah. Now, is that going to be a little bit different when you're fighting somebody like Charles Oliveira? Of course, Charles Oliveira is a significantly better striker than Mateusz Gamrot. But I do believe that Beneil Dariush is probably going to rely significantly more on his striking than he did in, say, the Tony Ferguson fight against somebody like Charles Oliveira, who has good jiu-jitsu. Even though, yes, Beneil Dariush has great grappling, he's not going to try to grapple a lot with Charles Oliveira. And then on the flip side for Oliveira, this is our first time seeing him since the Islam loss. How does the Islam loss affect him? Again, Oliveira notoriously has had problems, not with his confidence, I want to say, but has had problems when it comes to taking losses the right way. So I'm really interested to see, first off, how the Islam loss affects him. What did he improve on from the Islam loss, man? And just how this fight plays out. Because this is one of those stylistic matchups where they just always lead to fun fights, where you have 2 dudes who can grapple, you have 2 dudes who can strike, and they're just all around great at the sport of MMA, man. Like, you very rarely get these fights where 2 dudes are just great MMA fighters. Usually it's, okay, this dude is a great striker, this dude is a great wrestler. These are 2 complete MMA fighters, and I just think this is going to be an entertaining fight. I don't think it's going to be fight of the night. I think this is going to be a lot more condensed than the last couple of Charles Oliveira appearances that we've seen, like the Justin Gaethje fight and the Dustin Poirier fight, man. I do think he's going to tone it back a little bit, but we're still going to have that Charles Oliveira craziness. And again, Beneil Dariush is a dude who's had multiple 50K bonuses for fight of the night, man. So this may, again, end up being fight of the night at this point. And last but not least, the least excited I am for these 3 fights. It's not because I don't like either one of these fighters. I think Irene Aldana is entertaining, and Amanda Nunes is Amanda Nunes, man. But the reason is, I just think this isn't going to be a close fight, bro. Aldana has great boxing. She is a solid enough striker, but I don't think she has anything for Nunes, man. Now, there is one thing I do think will be entertaining, is whether or not Nunes, how long she strikes with her, and whether or not she strikes with her a lot. Like, how long the striking exchanges last. Okay, is she striking with her for 2 minutes at a time, whole rounds at a time, or is it she's striking and putting her takedowns down? Because I don't think Aldana's going to go for takedowns unless she absolutely has to. And her best bet is actually just striking with Amanda Nunes, who a couple fights ago did lose a striking battle in the 2nd round to Juliana Pena. So it's not like she's going to lose. It's not like that's the worst strategy in the world, even though, yeah, we all know the stuff that was surrounding Nunes. But again, I don't think this is just going to be that entertaining of a fight. Well, it's going to be entertaining. I don't think it's going to be that close of a fight. This is a classic fight where maybe Aldana gets a round off of Nunes and Nunes wins for it. Like, that's how I see this fight happening. I could be completely wrong, and I would not be surprised. Aldana won the last fight by upkick KO, which is unheard of in the UFC at this point, especially to the body, man. But she was also down. No, that fight was 1-1 going into the 3rd round, and she had just got rocked and taken down by Chad Son. So it's like, really. So yeah, that's my breakdown of this card. There are some other interesting fights on it for me. Eric Anders is like, that's just one of those drunk uncle fights, man. I say it all the time at my gym, like, you need a drunk uncle fight. That's, hey, we're gonna send 2 dudes out there who are gonna beat the shit out of each other, bro. Again, Khalil Roundtree, whoever he fights, Khalil Roundtree is like the personification of violence in the UFC, man. So I'm going to be interested to watch that. And there's a Russian kid on the, I'm not a Russian kid. There is a Canadian kid on this card who he's 4-5 in his last 5 fights. And out of those 4 wins, he's won like 4 of them by submission. So he's pretty good, man. But overall, this card is not great. Those are the 4 fights I'm interested in. Let me know what fights you guys are interested in down below. With that said, I'm out, man.